One. IronOverload.io Hardcore, episode 76 coming your way. Today is going to be a 2024 LGD-4033 Anabolicum SARMS Revisited. LGD is the first SARM I ever used. I think when SARMS really started hitting the market among gym rats out there, I'd say about 10 to 15 years ago is when LGD was really the most popular one, because LGD was very close to using an oral steroid as to the effects that it gave you in terms of lean muscle mass and all the other stuff and the benefits of putting yourself in the weight room and pushing yourself. So what is LGD? LGD-4033, it's a SARM, selective androgen receptor modulator, as pure of a SARM as you're going to find. And the reason it's called LGD was because it was discovered by Ligand Pharmaceuticals, and it binds the androgen receptor of muscle and bone selectively, and inhibits similar effects as testosterone, exhibits similar effects to testosterone. So you're going to get a lot of the benefits. The idea behind LGD, you get a lot of the benefits of using anabolic steroids without the side effects. So it's going to be much more selective the way it approaches you. So it's not going to give you specific types of side effects that anabolic steroids gives. And it's really, really a good option for a lot of people who want to do something more mild and try something different than anabolic steroid. It was developed originally as a way to treat diseases or conditions associated with muscle and bone deterioration, and that's pretty common when it comes to all SARMs. And the advantage of a SARM like LGD is the difference in activity it has on the body outside of muscle and bone. So it's not going to slam your prostate. It's not going to burn up your head hair. It's not going to increase the DHT in your body and cause skin issues and acne and all this stuff. It's not going to cause you to become completely shut down like anabolic steroids will. It's going to cause some suppression, but it won't cause a complete shutdown. So you'll be able to actually recover a lot quicker when you come off versus anabolic steroids, where you have to run this prolonged post-cycle therapy, and then you have to wait for your body to fully recover. And some of you out there will run anabolic steroids, and you'll just never be the same. You'll never recover fully. So the idea behind LGD is you can run it. It's really a good option for those of you in your early 20s who don't want to quite open the can of worms. And it's also a good option for you later on, even if you use anabolic steroids, to try something a little different that will conserve your HPTA over time. It won't slam them. So this goes for all SARMs. So I don't know, Mobster, you want to jump in and I'll kind of get more into how LGD works.
Yeah, look, Steve, one of the notes I made as you were talking is the LGD part you've explained, but what's amusing to me sometimes is seeing the various codes and numbers and whether they have any meaning or not. They do not. It's just literally a reference number that the company's created. But we tend to sort of have that sort of sticking in our mind. But ironically, and this is probably true of pretty much every SARM, steroid, PED there is, us lazy meatheads, which always shorten it. So it's nearly always LGD. We very rarely use the number afterwards. Something I wrote down here as well, Steve, is quote unquote, my buddy's feedback. So a comment that Steve just made about the younger guys not wanting to sort of jump in with the steroids. It's kind of ironic in this example, Steve, because a buddy of mine and this is one of my fellow mates that's competed with strongman, done quite well in the novices, has been lifting for 20 years, doing other sports, etc., and just recently started using LGD and absolutely raved about it. I was just like literally saying to me, he could feel it working within a very short period of time. It felt to him like of steroids, his muscles were hardening up, etc. And I think I made the comment to him saying, when a person that's been using steroids and growth and other bits and pieces for as long as you have, suddenly talks about, and also, which we're going to follow up with another podcast, RAD, and absolutely love these two SARMs, is kind of almost a recommendation, because this is a hardcore, he's used trend, he's used growth, he's done multiple cycles, and these two, specifically LGD and RAD, have just literally like amazed him and how effective they are, how potent they are, and the way that he felt when he was using them. The second thought for me was, and I've touched on this in other shows, I always say to people when they want to know the effects that a steroid or a SARM going to have and why they were developed, etc., you should always look at the medical use, because this is going to give you a very, very good indication. And in fact, something that you and I don't mention often enough is that the way that certain steroids, SARMs, etc., were discovered by us, quote unquote, meatheads, is that there's a few of us, the tiniest percentage, that love the science. I think you and I have touched upon, Steve's even worse for this than I am, in terms of I'm not too bad at reading studies. I kind of understand how they work. I understand the parameters. I understand the measures. I understand sometimes that they're sponsored and you need to look for that, see if there's a bias. I understand how peer reviews work and so on and so forth. And as often as not, I will speed read it and then hit the conclusion. And then if it catches my eye, I'll go back and look at what the parameters were, see if they use students, see if they were using patients in the hospital and so on. So it's interesting for us, those small percentage of us, probably about 1% of our listening audience, Steve, that like to look at these studies, read magazines like Scientific American, etc., and then, hey, what does this? Why? They literally, some of them have Google search set up for this, Steve, so that if an article comes up and it mentions anything vaguely anabolic for that would be enhance a lifters, bodybuilders, us performance enhancing users, drug users of interest, they're on it. They are on it. I mean, these guys will sit in the library at colleges and universities and they will read the whole goddamn thing from start to finish. And so, I mean, there's been a joke that's done around for years that we would eat elephant shit or donkey piss or something like this if it had an anabolic effect. So, of course, naturally, we look for products like SARMs, which for the most part have an anabolic or androgenic effect on our bodies, but with the least amount of side effects. In any study that says that, you know, the mouse runs twice as far, they show you photographs of a mouse with enhanced glutes, or there's a picture of a mouse and it's just super lean compared to its other mice, and so on and so forth. We're all over that like a rash. And LGD was definitely one of those SARMs. There's probably a lot more than we pay attention to that caught the eye of those people that love the research aspect to it and sort of suddenly said to us, how does this work? I mean, in the science stuff, in the actual study, and it's mentioned in the article that we're going to associate with this podcast, they literally had the mice do nothing for 14 days. So pretty much immobilized them. They couldn't go for a run, they couldn't climb, they couldn't do anything. Just so that they had the muscle shrank and the prostate shrank. And then when they put the mice back into activity and gave them the LGD, there was next to no activity in the prostate. It kind of stayed the same. In other words, it didn't shrink, it came back to normal, but there was no enhanced activity in the prostate yet. They showed potent activity in the skeletal muscle. And I'll read the rest, Steve, but very weak activity in the prostate, despite higher concentrations being found here. In other words, it's in there, the product's working away, it's actually in a high concentration. It would normally be found isolated or otherwise, and yet zero or next to no activity. That for us, as we like to use PEDs, as Steve said, that want to minimize their side effects, is fantastic. And then when you're seeing muscles being gained, again, in specifically with the SARMs that we look at, above and beyond returning to normal, above the baseline, above the normal before they immobilized or stop the mice moving around just to get muscle shrinkage. So we wouldn't normally do that, Steve. We wouldn't normally stop training and wait for the drug to have an effect. No, we carry on training and we want an anabolic effect. We want it over and above where we normally are. But again, it's something that guys, the listeners should sometimes do, work out why this is useful. And it's useful quite simply for patients. And I've used these examples before with cancer, major operations, burn victims, and so on and so forth. Pretty much every steroid you've looked at either helps you recover specifically from the medical condition, or in this case, helps you retain muscle. You don't get muscle loss or bone density loss while you're lying there in bed recovering from the operation. But for us, of course, that means if we are able to move that, if we are able to train, then the idea that we can add muscle, and in this case, enhance bone density at over and above the normal level, is precisely why we love this SARM. Back to you, Steve.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about, can LGD help us? Now, how? And Mobster and I have talked a little bit about it earlier. And there's different ways, you can use LGD. So originally when I used LGD, I used 10 milligrams a day and I ran it for 8 weeks. And it was good, clean, lean muscle mass that I put on. It's not going to be for you if you want to be like, you know what? I want to gain a ton of weight. I want to gain a ton of strength. I want to transform my physique in 8 weeks. It's not the one for you. Choose something else. Go with D-ball. If you want to move the scale and gain a bunch of muscle mass and water and fat, then go with D-ball. If you want to transform your physique in 8 weeks, go with Tren-Ace with some Masteron Probe, something like that. Go with these hardcore anabolic steroids, but they're going to have the side effects. So LGD is for those of you who want to just stay patient, do something that's going to not affect, not give you side effects. It's not going to give you problems with your sleep. It's not going to give you problems with gynecomastia or water retention or bloating or anything like that. And as long as you're using legitimate LGD, that will be the case. So what you want to do is run it 8 to 12 weeks, 10 milligrams a day. That's a really good dose. Some guys go a little higher. Some guys might go to 15 milligrams. Okay, that's fine. And look, it's versatile. You can use it with steroids. You can use it solo. You can use it with other SARMs. So the most popular way to stack it, if you're going to use it in just a SARM stack, is GW. That's the number one most popular way over the past 10 or 15 years. Guys have been using it who are gym rats and who do CrossFit and stuff like that, because GW is really, really good for fat loss and endurance, and then LGD is good for lean muscle mass. So now you combine them, now you're going to get the trifecta. You're going to get great endurance benefits, you're going to get good lean muscle mass, and you're going to get good fat loss. So it's going to work really good for you. A lot of you who are doing different types of athletic things, you're really, really going to enjoy it. So, Mobster, what do you think about that stack?
Definitely, Steve. I mean, the LGD in and of itself is supposed to enhance to a smaller degree your endurance, and then the idea that combining it with GW to me is the double whammy. It's certainly. Do you know what? Reading the text and listening to what you just said, it reminds me, and we've just done a podcast on this as well, of a very mild form of tren. And I say very mild form of tren, except it's not impinging your cardio, it's actually slightly enhancing it. But one of our suggestions when we talked about the trend was adding GW as a way of keeping your cardio. This one was a double whammy because you're actually getting a tested slight enhancement of your endurance, and then you're bringing in the GW. In fact, a note I made while you were talking, Steve, is that this would be perfect on a diet when you're cutting back. And cutting back typically means you've got less carbs, calories, etc., going in. So it's that much harder to do the cardio. It's that much harder to do any kind of endurance work. And having the double whammy effect here of something that boosts in a mild way, and then GW, as we know, is a much more effective enhancer of your cardiovascular ability, to me, while cutting back, would be great. Another way of looking at it, Steve, and there's something else. The studies suggest a possible therapy for test efficiency. In other words, when we talk about suppression, we're talking about suppression on a steroid stack versus suppression, say, on a SARM stack or SARMs run solo. And the phrase that we like to use when we talk about SARMs is minimal suppression. Now, the idea that in a therapy that there was actually, I'm assuming not every single study showed this, Steve, but as a possible therapy for test efficiency suggests it's actually beneficial. How that works, I would like to have a look at to see more information on it. Something else, and this is another reason why I thought tren, and it just stuck in my particular brain. We know that tren is absolutely amazing for recomposition, and a suggested use for LGD again was as a recomposition drug. And again, the idea of doing that double whammy with the GW appeals to me for the same reason. It's like you're able to do more cardio, which means you're able to get leaner, reduce, extend the amount of calories that you're doing to a high level, and hopefully, fingers crossed, if it all works the way it's supposed to work, reduce your body fat levels while at the same time retaining muscle. So those things appeal to me a lot, and I can imagine, especially listeners that are looking to get lean, looking to get in shape, looking to maintain their muscle and not lose that while stripping the fat away. And as one of the comments here is, become more vascular. So to me, I can see precisely why my buddy and a great many listeners who've already used LGD would absolutely love this particular SARM. I mean, the way that we're talking here, Steve, it almost makes you think, certainly I could see that if I was restarting my time again in the sport, LGD would 100% be on my radar way before anabolic steroids. For you younger guys, and we tend towards the 25 plus as the age that we have in our minds, fully mature, that you've trained hard enough, you know about nutrition. And 25 plus is where we say, okay, you should be old enough, you know what you're doing, you've been around the game long enough, steroids is okay. When we talk about SARMs, we tend to drop a few years off there, 20, 21, 22 years of age. I didn't start using any PDs till I was 37, but I can absolutely see me coming into the sport now. LGD would definitely be on my radar. I mean, an obvious example, and Steve's a big fan of this again, and I think the phrase that we've used when we talked about it is bloods will out, meaning you have blood tests and you see the impact on your body. And Steve will back me up on this, I think, that SARMs, as often as not, Steve, for the most part, with maybe one or two exceptions, I'm thinking specifically of S23, have far less of a meaningful and bad, I'll put it in those words, impacts on your bloods, on those measures of body health, organ health, than do steroids. And again, the idea that you can maintain muscle, get leaner, increase your cardio, combine it with something else to take your cardio up another notch, and have better blood test results to show that you're actually in a better condition, and specifically less likely to have an impact on your fertility, less likely to have an impact on your prostate. We should probably do a podcast at some point, and you might have done one of these already, Steve, just on prostate as a man health thing and how important a measure it is of what we do. So any PED, including SARMs, including LGD, that is beneficial and or has less of an impact on the prostate is unbelievably important. It's something that younger fellas tend to sort of ignore, but us older fellas tend to pay a lot more attention to. What do you think about that, Steve?
Yeah, for sure. And at the end of the day, you know, how you use these compounds makes a difference, and how you stack them makes a difference. Now, you can use LGD by itself, but by stacking it, you actually get even better results. And I'm going to kind of go over some of these stacks. I already talked about stacking with the GW, but there's a lot more ways to stack LGD. Here's one mobster that you're going to like, the strength stack. And the strength stack includes S23, which is one of the most powerful SARMs out there, S4, which we've talked about on a prior podcast, and also LGD. And stacking these three together is a really, really good strength stack. They stack really well for those. So this would be a strength stack for, I would say, if you're at least like 25 years old, you'd really like this stack, because LGD is one of the most suppressive SARMs out there. But you could run these three together. You could run 10 to 15 milligrams of the LGD, 50 milligrams of the S4, and then run the S23 at 10 to 15 milligrams a day. And that would be a really, really good strength stack. Another one is a hunger stack. And the hunger stack would include Nutribol MK677, which we've also talked about on a prior podcast in our family of podcasts that we've done, and LGD. So MK677, 25 milligrams, you could split it, half of that in the morning, half of that before dinner, or you could just do the whole thing in the morning for excess hunger the whole day. It's going to help cause ghrelin to be elevated. It's going to cause IGF-1 to be elevated, growth hormone, and that's going to make you hungry. That's going to make you want to eat. And you can add in LGD at that 10 to 15 milligram dose, and that would work really good as well. Healing stack, LGD is included in the healing stack. You've got the Nutribol, which I just talked about, and then you can add MK2866, which is Osterine, and you can add Osterine at about 25. Some guys go up as high as 50 milligrams a day, and then you add in the LGD. That combined with sensible training or rest, and if you've got some nagging injuries you're trying to get healed, this would be a really, really good stack. We have a guy on the forum, he's running a stack similar to this, and he's talking about, he's like, wow, within the first 2 weeks, I'm already feeling a lot better. I've had these ligament issues and joint issues. Wow, I'm already feeling better. So this is a really good healing stack that you can try. to help. It's not gonna be a miracle. It's not gonna heal. If you just had a motorcycle accident, you broke like, you know,
Yeah.
10 bones and you had all this damage to your body, you can't just get on this stack and 2 weeks later you're back in the gym, right? I mean, it's got to be within something reasonable here. If you got like 3 herniated discs, it's not gonna help, you know,
Yeah, it's
heal
going to
your.
enhance. It's going to enhance.
It's
Yeah.
gonna help, yeah. It's gonna, but it's not
Yeah.
gonna cure it. So this isn't like some magic pill here. I just want to be clear on that. But it will help. But again, if you every day you're a boxer and your knuckles are
Yeah.
messed up and your wrists are messed up, and you take this and you don't give your body a break from boxing, you go back in the boxing gym and you start boxing, you know, and you're back into it. What do you think is gonna happen? Your injury is not gonna heal. So you want to combine it with being smart in nursing your injury or working around the injuries that you have. You don't want to have injuries become chronic because you're stubborn. Mobster, you want to comment on any of those stacks so far? And I'm going to talk
Yeah,
about two more.
I was actually thinking one of our good buddies, Dylan Gillamelli, is quite often asked about these kind of things and puts together stacks. And for the healing stack, I can see Dylan suggesting, and I think it would be a great addition, TB500, which is a fantastic healing peptide. PPC also in there. And again, it completely depends on your disposable income and how serious the injury. 100%. And I say this all the time, and I've been guilty of this, Steve, rushing back after an illness, rushing back after an injury, and just being too goddamn quick. Listen, guys, let me make it easy for you. And I'll use the analogy that Steve's just done. You absolutely will get better quicker with this than without, but you need to rest sometimes, and you certainly need to do the rehab, whether that's leg extensions with just a pair of heavy shoes on, or resistance band work, or whatever else. That is super, super important. Steve and I have touched upon this multiple times, especially when it comes to these kind of situations. We get it. We know how frustrating it is. You're going on gangbusters, your strength was through the roof, and you get a tweak, you get a disc, you get a muscle strain, you get a minor muscle tear. It does your, as we say here in the UK, Steve, it does your fucking nutting. Of course it does. It's super frustrating. But you got the rest of your life. Unless you're a professional athlete, you have the rest of your life. So rest, recover, rehab, and then enhance recovery. The other thing, Stephen, and this is more to do with the fact that with this series of podcasts is about updating. I was actually, the question I've put down here is, have we changed our opinions on dosing? I'm going to say no. There's some, we did a podcast just a few days ago where we had, and I won't say what it is, but we'd gone from one dose to a different dose. GW, for example, I think that dose has been consistent. There's very, very little benefits to doing less, and I can't see any great benefit to doing more. The 20 milligrams a day that we would say with GW, aka cardarine, is pretty much a fixed number. 99.9% of you will do best with that. It works for nearly everybody, and there seems to be no need to vary that. But one other SARM that we talked about, we'd pretty much doubled the amount that we were using 15, 20 years ago to where we are now. And we've done that simply by going away, looking at the thousands of logs, thousands of comments, tens of thousands of users, hundreds of thousands of users in some case, and seeing that what the suggested dose was perhaps came from a study and was proven, you know, for example, how much were they giving the mice, and then magnify that by kilograms of body weight for a human being, and said, oh, we saw results at this level. But we're PED users. We are not using some drugs, some steroids, some SARMs at the levels that are medically beneficial. We use them for sports and helmets, lifting more weights, bigger muscles. And what's happened over time as those dosages have changed? I think with LGG, we're kind of there. I believe 10 milligrams was the number where we was before, Steve, and the 10 to 15 milligrams is where we are now. So in this particular case, why we know more about how it works, why we know that there's been plenty of users in the meantime, since the last time we talked about this in a show, you, me, or anybody else that did the shows with you before, or even in the 15 or 20 years that this SARM has been available, the dosing hasn't really changed that much. And it's quite simply, and it's a head fuck for some people, there's a lot of bullshit, but also a sort of macho bravado. And sometimes it's just good old fashioned skewed logic, where we get this thing in our mind which says if X, which is 10 milligrams, works, then X times 20 milligrams is going to be twice as effective. And that's simply not the case. If you're gaining 5 pounds of muscle on 10 milligrams of any PED, you will not necessarily gain 10 if you double the dose. And here we haven't really seen a swing in the way that we suggest using it. certainly in terms of dosing. What we might have done, I think this is another reason what Steve are bringing back in for this, what we might have done is seen more users stack this with other SARMs and use it in between steroid cycles, and even sometimes, Steve, with some of the SARMs with steroid cycles. What do you think on that particular way of thinking? And again, I'm focusing specifically on any changes or updates to where we was before.
Yeah, before we get into that, I want to kind of talk about the other SARMS stacks. And another one is the bulking stack. And this one is very similar to the string stack, but instead we're swapping in RAD. So we're doing RAD, S23, and LGD. Or you can just do LGD and RAD. A lot of people who just want to do a bulk, they'll just keep it that way. So if you're a guy in your early 20s, I would go LGD RAD. If you're a guy 25 or over, you could throw in also S23, and that would be a good bulking stack. And then an advanced strength stack, and this involves peptides. You got GHRP6, GHRP2, then you got LGD, S4, S23, and RAD. This would be a really advanced strength stack, and this would be a good one to use. It's not going to shut you down hard. It's not going to cause an incredible amount of side effects like you would if you were to do a strength stack of, let's say, Debol, Deca, Tren, etc., testosterone or Sustanon. A lot of those, you end up opening yourself up if you did that type of stack to all kinds of side effects, from gyno to tons of water retention to blood pressure problems, cholesterol problems, massive amount of shutdown, libido issues. You know, some people never come back from their libido issues from that. So you could go with this SARM stack along with the peptides and get very good keepable strength improvements without having to worry about those side effects. So that's why a lot of people really are big fans of SARMs. Mobster?
Yeah, that phrase you just used, keepable, is sprung out to me, Steve. So I've touched upon multiple times on various podcasts that we've done about all different kinds of compounds, the percentage of muscle you will keep, what versus what you got on cycle versus what you'll keep off cycle, right? So there's an argument to be made, I believe, for SARMs, and I'm also going to touch on something else. When it comes to SARMs, because the gains aren't as crazy as, say, on Debol or on Anavar or Tren or whatever, say, for example, and this would be an example, guys, do not quote this as a number. Let's imagine that you got, every time you did a steroid cycle, you gained 10 pounds. The chances are that you will keep 5 to 6 pounds of that muscle. And some of that is because it's water and fat, glycogen, etc., etc. And some of it is simply because your body just really doesn't want to hold on to 10 pounds. Now, again, this is a pure example. With SARMs, the gains tend to be a percentage, 6%, 60%. So, for example, instead of 10 pounds, it would be 6 pounds. But you're going to keep, in my opinion, Steve, a much higher number. So the gains on SARMs tend to be keepable. Something else, and this is where I think something specifically has changed. So the article that we're associated with this was, this used to be called the strongest SARM on the market today. I think at some point, Steve, we're going to do an updated on S23. And I would actually argue, reputation included, that S23 is seen now, for one reason or another, as the strongest SARM. So there's another change. But for the most part, the advice we're giving you, the information we've talked about, is only really updated in terms of user experience and the ability to stack it with other drugs versus the dosing, etc., or any information that's changed per se. So keep that in mind. Definitely let us know your thoughts. Come onto the forums, talk about this in the comments. Please note, we are not doctors and the opinions are ours. It's our view and based on our experience and views on the topic. A podcast are for informational purposes and entertainment only. The freedom of speech and the First Amendment applies.